And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Monday's version of Cold War Radio, live on our home base. WAAR, we are America Radio, your number one source for streaming political and government talk anywhere. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr., deep down in the bunker in my Smith & Wesson studio in the city of Pittsburgh and west of Murmansk, Russia. With a little Finnish and Swedish buffer, let's welcome Radio Norway to the program. Good evening and come in, Norway.
Hey, 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 snowflake, my pretty little snowflake. I hope we'll melt a few of those, and if you hear thumping and swearing outside your house tonight, it's just a few liberals on their way home from the eclipse party.
That's it. Please follow me on Spreaker, ladies and gentlemen. Like the Facebook page, facebook.com/Cold War Radio, 2 A's in war. You can catch the show on Roku, Blueberry, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and the Cold War Radio app, which is free in your app store. The Cold War Radio patron hotline is open at 412-567-1460. Chat room is up on Spreaker. Go to steelcityresistance.com. Catch the show notes there, the show notes links. If you can help, hit the donate button on the website or become a Cold War Radio patron on the right-hand side. Mail is Hutch Bailey Jr., P.O. Box 96022, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15226. The email, hutch@steelcityresistance.com. Let's get right to the mail from Doc in the chat room. You all know him in the chat room. Sent a wonderful parcel all the way from the West Coast. Please find inside this box 3 medical kits. The largest of the 3 is for you, which is a combination of a general advanced medical kit combined with mil-spec battlefield trauma kit of my own design. The smaller black kit is for your son. I would be honored if you would send it to him in Bagram. I truly believe it's good luck. Of the thousands I have made, only once has the kit been needed, and that person survived. Normally, I build the kits for donation to military and law enforcement personnel. Individuals, I only ask that they make a donation in the name of Marine Staff Sergeant David Lyon to the charity EOD Warrior Foundation. That's EODWarriorFoundation.org, and he makes no money from the venture. Originally inspired to do this after his friend David, a Marine EOD tech, was gravely wounded by an IED in Afghanistan in 2010, wherein he lost both legs, part of his arm, and one eye. Sadly, he passed away in 2014 from complications due to his injury. At his wake, several medics and I, 2 corpsmen and 1 Special Forces 18 Delta medic, 1 Air Force Papa Juliet, and Danny, an Army Critical Care Flight paramedic, got together and talked about what we would put in our ideal med kit. This led to a year-long journey to create just that, and the kits I'm sending you is the final result of that. I would ask anybody that can to go to EODWarriorFoundation.org, and if you would like to donate to Sergeant David Lyon's charity, you can do it there. I will be putting a link to that on the website. Let me see. Let's talk about Staff Sergeant David Lyon for a second. Staff Sergeant David B. Lyon was born on November 24th, 1981 in Logan, Utah. He enlisted in the Marine Corps and arrived at Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego on October 27th, 2003. After graduating boot camp and completing Marine combat training, Staff Sergeant Lyon transferred to 29 Palms, California for training as a field radio operator. After MOS school, Staff Sergeant Lyon was transferred to Camp Pendleton and assigned to Headquarters Company 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. In 2004, he was reassigned to Headquarters Company, 1st Marine Division. In the same year, in August, Staff Sergeant Lyon deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. In 2005, Staff Sergeant Lyon made a lateral move to Explosive Ordnance Disposal, EOD. In October of 2005, Staff Sergeant Lyon reported to Naval School Explosive Ordnance Disposal for training as a basic EOD technician. Staff Sergeant Lyon graduated from EOD school in June of 2006 and was transferred to Marine Wing Support Squadron 373, Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, California. Staff Sergeant Lyon deployed to Iraq again in August 06. In August 2008, Staff Sergeant Lyon deployed to Afghanistan in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Staff Sergeant Lyon deployed to Afghanistan again in April 2010 in support of OEF, where he was wounded in action and medically evacuated from Afghanistan. Due to injuries sustained, Staff Sergeant Lyon was medically retired from the Marine Corps on 30 July 2012. Staff Sergeant Lyon died as a result of his injuries on 29 July 2014. His personal awards include the Purple Heart, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat V, that's for valor, ladies and gentlemen, 2 combat action ribbons, and various other campaign medals and decorations. Staff Sergeant Lyon is survived by his parents Gordon and Lynette Lyon, his son Ethan Lyon, and his 6 siblings, Jonathan, Michael, Stephen, Christine Lyon Tenevieve, Rachel Lyon Wall, and Mary Jane Lyon Crowley. Rest in peace, Staff Sergeant Lyon, and thank you for your sacrifice. And thank you, Doc, for the work that you do. Thousands of those kits, really people like you make it happen, no doubt. And once again, thank you. And just on a much lighter note, I did contact my son, who told me he would be honored to sport that medical kit inside his platoon's gun, so it'll be there for the entire platoon. He would like some coffee, though. He said, I asked him what he wanted, and he said, I'll be honest, I would love coffee, like Black Rifle coffee, Death Wish coffee, things like that. It's great coffee, but it's also made by vets and in America. Stuff here tastes like mud. Of course, it's not worded that way. I asked him if he had a way to brew it. He said, yeah, we have a machine to grind the whole bean coffee. And I asked him if the females wanted that too. He said, yeah, they want it too. An electric grinder would be cool too, so we get the whole bean coffee and some magazines or books to pass the time and healthy snacks. If anybody's interested in any of that, I have a machine, I'll send them. But if anybody's interested in any of that, give me a shout at Hutch at SteelCityResistance.com. Okay, you ready to get into it, Radio Norway? Or do you have any comments first?
Yeah, well, a big shout out to Doc. I think this is absolutely fantastic, serving several great purposes at the same time. And I'm a medic myself, so what a great idea, Doc. Big shout out. Thank you, brother.
And I'll tell you, too, he probably wouldn't say anything, but I will. The freaking postage was $45.
Wow.
Just the postage. I saw that and I was like, wow. And the package was a little beat up. Everything was fine, but I'm thinking, the post office, they charge $45. You think they would handle it a little gentler, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, we had the same problem in Norway. It's a socialist institution. It boils down to that. They have no respect.
That's it. Here we go.
Господин представитель, это что, для вас открытие? Весь мир знает, что самая империалистическая держава – это Соединенные Штаты Америки. Об этом все воробьи на крышах чирикают, что самая империалистическая держава, которая поддерживает колониальный режим в колониях – это Соединенные Штаты Америки. А он возмущен. Какая, так сказать, невинность, понимаете, разыгрывается здесь, в то время, когда знает, что эта невинная барышня уже, наверное, десяток имеет детей.
Ich richte diesen Appell an alle unsere Volksgenossen, die an unseren Staat und an unser Reich glauben. Würdest du allein stehen, was wärst du denn auf dieser Welt? Dein Gehalt, dein Lohn, du eine große Gemeinschaft bist, jedem Einzelnen mit verdammt zu lassen. Sage mir nicht, das ist doch mächtig über den Zusammenhang. Du hast nie den Hunger kennengelernt, was würdest du mit wie heftiger Hunger sind?
Im Sturm conditions of life must give way. They must perish in the revolutionary Holocaust. Karl Marx, the left in general, fundamentally opposed Nazism, because Hitler had distorted Marxism beyond recognition. Gassing people based on their nationality was absolutely inexcusable. The selection should be based on class. Hitler got it all wrong. Absolutely different people needed to be killed. The only true Marxist country on earth was the Soviet Union. It exterminated, strictly according to Marxist teaching, the class enemies.
और टूट अंग कहने की रट छोड़ दो, अब वो दौर नहीं रहा। जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है और तुम्हें 71 का जमाना याद है और आज जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है। जिहाद के सामने ना रूस ठहर सका ना अमेरिका ठहर सका, इंशाल्लाह इंडिया नहीं ठहरेगा। ये जिहाद का दौर शुरू हो चुका है। जिहाद को दुनिया नहीं जानती, जिहाद को लोग नहीं समझते। अब भाइयों सुन लो, जिहाद मुल्कों की मुल्कों से जंग नहीं होती, फौजों की फौजों से जंग नहीं, असले की असले से जंग नहीं होती। जब जिहाद होता है तो जमीन आसमान के दरमियान जंग होती है, मतलब सारी आसमानों से।
All right, time for Shaping Our World, ladies and gentlemen. Last week on Shaping Our World, we highlighted a few of the plethora of ties between the Democratic Party's racist policies and their admirers in fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, and how the Democratic Party was the template on which the Nazis built their race laws. But in this show, we're going to take a look at the ties between the totalitarian Democratic Party and its communist ties. Now, Norway, these are very important ties as we go through the metamorphosis and just the hysterical, maniacal, lie-based things that we're going through today.
Absolutely. It might seem strange for some people that haven't dug very deep into socialism and communism, Nazism, that the very same party, the Democratic Party in America, could have both ties to communism and Nazism. But when you start looking at the ideologies, they are really different forms of socialism. And during the first part of World War II, Stalin and the Soviet Union were allies with Hitler and Nazi Germany through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. So they are ideologically, if not twins, at least cousins.
Absolutely. And the thing about the whole way that the Democrats do things, the Democrat Party is a hodgepodge of different special interest groups, all of which are against representative republic. And all they would have to do was look to Nazi Germany, all these groups, especially the weaker ones, and they could look at the history and realize only one of these groups is going to survive. The strongest group is going to kill the other groups. And I really don't care. They can all kill each other for all I care. But what's the main question, Norway, that we want to answer, or we want the audience to answer or ask tonight?
Yeah, the main question for our listeners tonight is, how do we expose the sinister plans of the so-called Democratic Party to steal America and enslave Americans? And is it already too late? So if you have a answer or a suggestion, give us a call. The number is 412-567-1460.
All right. Yeah, that's please do. I know there's a lot of questions out there. I know just talking about this 10 years ago would have stopped the conversation. But as we go down the line of the exposure, they started exposing themselves during the George W. Bush administration. They really started doing it with Barack Obama. And when Bernie Sanders came on the scene, it might as well be the Communist Party USA. They might as well, when you put Keith Ellison and that other Marxist in charge of the party, I can't even remember his name, he's so obscure, another Marxist, though, La Raza individual, you put these guys up at the forefront and you have millions of people voting for Bernie Sanders. We've got a serious problem that we need to address. And you've got communists in the media that don't realize that they're going to shut their own cameras off if they get everything they want. But in the midst of all this is a patriot, and he's not even an American patriot. He's from New Zealand. His name is Trevor Luton. And if you ever get the chance to check his work out, he is better at exposing communists in the United States government than anyone in America is. He has a website, The New Zeal, thenewzeal.com, which is just has a plethora of information regarding this. But he wrote a documentary. He produced a documentary, Democrats and Communists, a review of the documentary, which the documentary's name is The Enemies Within. Let's listen to a very short clip. You can go to the show notes links, and you can listen to the entire 9-minute talk with Trevor Luton. But just to get a taste of what he's talking about, let's listen to this clip.
Could your congressman pass an FBI security check? That's the question that Trevor Loudon asks in his new film, The Enemies Within, based off of his book with the same title, The Enemies Within, Communists, Socialists, and Progressives in the U.S. Congress. Loudon's film exposes the far-left, outright Marxist-Leninist and Islamic connections of various members of the U.S. Congress. Trevor, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Great to be here, Christian. Thanks for having me.
So, Trevor, I'd like to ask you, when did you get started in this interest in communism?
Look, it really started back, I've got to say, reading in New Zealand, reading JBS literature back in the early 70s. I read books like The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen and several books recommended or published by the JBS. But it really became personal for me in 1984 when we elected a socialist Labour government in my country. And one of the very first things they did was to ban nuclear warships from our harbours. Now, we had a military alliance with the United States up to that point, the Australia-New Zealand-United States Military Alliance, ANZUS. And there was a very strong pro-American feeling because we had been saved during World War II from invasion by the Japanese, by the US military. So they banned nuclear warships, it destroyed the alliance with the United States, and there was a lot of debate in the papers at the time. Oh, the peace movement are communists, they're working at the behest of Moscow, they want to drive a wedge in the Western alliance. And of course the peace movement was, no, we just love peace, we want an independent foreign policy for New Zealand, we don't want nuclear war. We want our kids to live free. And so a friend of mine who was one of the early computer geeks, we went down together and we went to the local library and poured through all the peace movement publications and put the names on a database. Then we went down to the library and found the Communist Party publications and got all the bylines and all the names, and we put those in the database. And guess what? There were matches all over the place.
So these are communist front groups posing
they were completely
as peace organizations.
And you can also look into those communist front groups at David Horowitz's site, Connecting the Networks. Connecting the Networks, is that it? It's in my research.
Discover the Networks.
That's it, Discover the Networks. So I'm in the research room on the website. Or you can just Google it. But it's prevalent. It really is. And I think the main idea that really piqued my interest on this, and I don't see why it couldn't happen, and it should happen. Absolutely, it should start tomorrow morning. The question, could your congressman pass an FBI security check? Now, why wouldn't we do that? Of course, we know why we wouldn't do that, because the communists and the Islamists and everybody else is in Congress. But that's a question that anti-communist researcher author and now filmmaker Trevor Loudon from New Zealand poses in this documentary, and I think it's very pertinent. I mean, and you heard him talk about how the socialist government in New Zealand basically cut military ties with the United States, who saved them from savagery from a Japanese invasion.
Not only in New Zealand, we had the same socialist policies in Norway, where the Norwegian socialist government blocked American ships from arriving in port just on the suspicion that they might be carrying nuclear warheads. It's we see the same symptoms. But what I find interesting is that here you have a guy like Trevor Loudon from New Zealand, who is doing the job that every other American ought to be doing about their own country and their own communist infiltration. So I find it a little interesting that apart from a few guys like Horowitz, there are very few that puts focus on this really threatening situation, really threatening policy.
Absolutely, and the way they do it, they don't mince words. They say communists. I mean, David Horowitz is one of the most outspoken former communists that we have. But there was a false flag collapse. I mean, to many, the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89 meant the end of communism and the collapse of the USSR as an international global terror. And you heard the way communists like Barack Obama, when he was debating Mitt Romney, kind of laughed off the fact that Russia is still very communist, no matter what they call themselves.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Trevor Loudon is absolutely right in this when he calls this a false flag collapse, because what we saw when the old USSR collapsed and the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 was that suddenly these old communists that had been standing on the barricades supporting Rote Armee-Fraktion, terrorist organizations like that throughout Europe and also America. Suddenly you found them in the boardrooms, you found them in high public offices, you found them in the central planning of what was to become the European Union, and also in the American Congress. So and even on Wall Street. So I mean. The apprehension and the vigilance was deleted with this fall of the USSR, but the threat has remained, and actually it's been easier for the communists to penetrate our civil institutions.
Absolutely, and let's fast forward to today. But before we do that, let me get this on the line here. And stand by. All right, 417, are you going to come on the line or what? 417, are you there? What's your name and where are you calling from? Okay, that doesn't want to come on. There you go, 417, are you there? 417, going once. All right, let's fast forward to today, Norway, and there we go. What's your name?
JB.
JB.
Yep.
Where are you calling from? Where are you calling from, JB?
From Missouri.
What's on your mind?
Well, I was thinking about the 1984 letter that Ted Kennedy had written to the Soviet Union asking for help to undermine President Reagan, and how ironic it is that Democrats don't have a problem with that, but they want to make up some kind of connection that doesn't even exist with President Trump.
That's the first thing that I thought of when all of that happened. What JB is referring to is when they declassified all the KGB archives. People went in there and scoured them and actually found documentation of the Lion of the Senate, Ted Kennedy, colluding through his staff with the actual KGB trying to do damage to Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign. And, no media talks about it. Intelligent people know about it, but the vast majority of Democrats worship the Kennedys.
And yet, when it comes to, they don't have one bit of evidence about any real connection to Russia with the current president, Donald Trump, yet they've got hard evidence there, and they never did anything. Even a senator could be impeached.
Right. You're right. They should be arrested. But, hey, thanks for the call, JB. We appreciate it. Call back again.
Okay.
All right, JB from Missouri. Ladies and gentlemen, 412-567-1460. Let me try to get to the 2016 Democrat presidential candidate and U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. On the surface, he's a self-proclaimed democratic socialist who purports to want the United States to resemble Scandinavian socialist states such as Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Is that a good idea, Norway?
Definitely not. Look at Sweden, how it's working out for them now. They're sinking into a quagmire, and the only reason why Norway is partly floating is that we have quite a good oil revenue, but already now that quite huge oil fund has been spent by the socialists, and it's not going to cover the retirement plans as it was supposed to, but instead it's going to be spent on public services, which is quite contrary to what the fund was set up to do. So it is a really, really bad idea. But Bernie Sanders, or Bolshevik Bernie, as some call him rightly, he isn't a democratic socialist. He wants to take things much further than Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, Hutch.
In an old video clip dated August 1985, Sanders is seen openly defending the lack of food in communist dictatorships such as the Soviet Union and Cuba. Sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing. In other countries, people don't line up for food. The rich get the food and the poor starve to death, Sanders said. A brilliant guy, this guy. Give me a break. You can see what's happening in Venezuela today. In 2014, he endorsed Jesus Chai Garcia, a Cook County commissioner and longtime supporter of Communist Party USA, for mayor of Chicago. During his endorsement, Sanders spoke alongside his good friend Scott Marshall, a leader of the Chicago Communist Party and vice chairman of the Communist Party USA. In fact, as Loudon reveals, Sanders got his start in radical communist circles in the early 60s as a student at the University of Chicago, where he joined the Young People's Socialist League, which is the Democratic Socialist youth wing of the Socialist Party USA. He also briefly worked for then Communist Party-controlled United Packing House Workers of America labor union. So, this is clear. One of the common denominators, Norway, when you talk about communism in the United States, is Chicago.
Yeah, you have Bernie working out of there. You have Barack Obama and Saul Alinsky. It's a communist powerhouse.
No doubt about it. Ladies and gentlemen, there is just a lot of information here that you can check out. I urge you to go to the show notes links at steelcityresistance.com. This is Cold War Radio 499 because we are going to have a celebration tomorrow night. We're going to start early at 7 p.m. For episode 500. All kinds of old voices not old voices, but former voices that you've heard on the show before, will be here tomorrow night. It's going to be great. Norway is going to co-host it with me, and we're going to keep it light, keep it, see what happens, and we'll go from there. But anyway, go check this out at the show notes links page. Now, Norway, David Horowitz brings us the rest of the program in two parts. This is, I think, the highlight of my career to this day is my interview with David Horowitz about 5 years ago down in Orlando, Florida. I passed up a meet and greet with, who's that little sawed-off guy on the 5? The little short guy. I forget his name. He doesn't impress me. But he's on the 5 for Fox News, and he has his own show, Red Eye, or he did. His name is slipping me. I can't remember his name. But anyway, David Horowitz is my favorite interview. What do we got going on between Alinsky and Obama?
Yeah, well, I would urge people to take a look at the show notes, because this is we have an excerpt there from the book Barack Obama's Rules for Revolution, which is, of course, a play on Saul Alinsky's book Rules for Radicals. And it's absolutely pivotal for our listeners to understand this. And I definitely understand when you say that your favorite interview ever was with David Horowitz, because this guy, remember, this guy was a revolutionary. He rubbed shoulders with these big potatoes in the revolutionary movement. So he knows where they come from. He knows their way of thinking, and thank God he was a smart guy, David Horowitz, and he switched allegiances. And what he brings to the table with the Horowitz Freedom Center and all these affiliates with that center is a treasure trove. And when we look at Alinsky and Obama, and I urge people to go to steelcityresistance.com and take a look at the show notes. We have a description of who Saul Alinsky was and what kind of thinking he did. And first and foremost, he was a community organizer, the same term employed by his most famous disciple, Barack Obama, to describe himself. Isn't that right, Hutch?
Absolutely. And he actually came of age in the 30s and was drawn to the world of Chicago gangsters, whom he had encountered professionally as a sociologist. He sought out and became a social intimate of the Al Capone mob and Capone enforcer Frank Nitti, who took the reins when Capone was sent to prison for tax evasion in 1931. He said that Nitti took me under his wing. I called him the professor, and I became his student. And you can see the mafia-type tactics that the Democrat Party uses to this day. And it's becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, Alinsky was one of the people that taught this crime family that if you tell a lie once, it's a lie. It wasn't actually him that came up with this. It was the Germans. But he perfected it, and he made sure they all knew it. And if you ask a schlub on the street that doesn't watch the news about Russia, he's immediately going to talk about Trump, because this works. And there was such a tolerance. Back in the day, there wasn't a tolerance by journalists and politicians for this. But we just sat, and to just get off the subject a little bit, we just sat and watched the entire Republican Party not say a damn word about this Russian lie. The whole party. Nobody came out nightly on the news and said this is a lie, when they know it's a lie. They all know it's a lie. 3/4 of the Democrats that aren't brain dead knew it was a lie. So when you can do this with no pushback, then we're at an extreme disadvantage. And the reason that we're doing this program is to show you that these people are not American politicians with a leftist leaning. These are communists that want to take over the country.
I would actually go so far as to say that they are more dangerous than communists. Because communists, they're ideologically religious in a sense. But by his own account, Alinsky was too independent to join the Communist Party, but instead became a forerunner of the left that emerged in the wake of the communist fall. Like leftists who came of age after the Soviet collapse, Alinsky understood that there was something flawed in the communist outlook. But also, like them, he never really examined what those flaws might be. In particular, he never questioned the Marxist view of society and human nature, or his goal of a utopian future, and he never examined its connection to the epic crimes that the Marxists had committed. He never asked himself whether the vision of a society which would be socially equal was itself the source of the totalitarian state. Instead, Alinsky identified the problem posed by communism as inflexibility and dogmatism, and proposed as a solution that radicals should be political relativists, that they should take an agnostic view of means and ends. For Alinsky, the revolutionary purpose is to undermine the system and then see what happens. And what do we have today, Hutch?
We have a setup. Everybody's going crazy. We're starting to get into the area where the Russia system, the Russia play didn't work. First, the misogynistic play didn't work. Then the Russia play didn't work. The racial play is not going to work. So now we're starting to ease in to the 25th Amendment play, saying that the president is crazy, which that too is not going to work. The only thing that's going to get destroyed by what's going on right now is the Republican Party. And the Republican Party better wake up, because at the end of this mess, you're not going to win anything. Nobody is ever going to vote for another Republican again if something happens to this president. I'm telling you that. You better believe me when I say that. Now, with the communists, a lot of times you'll hear me rail against union leaders. Now, I don't rail against unions. I don't begrudge somebody who joins a union because it's his job or it's his line of work. My son's in a union. But the leaders, I'll give you an exercise. Go to the nearest big city near you and Google that city and unions and hit images. And you'll see a plethora of images that all have communist themes. This is just the way it is. You might have to put union history, because they're getting a little better at it now. But communists played a formative role in the creation of the CIO, the Progressive Coalition of Industrial Unions, led by John L. Lewis and then Walter Reuther. In the late 40s, Reuther purged the communists from the CIO. He was a socialist, but unlike Alinsky, an anti-communist and American patriot. In Rules for Radicals, Alinsky, a deracinated Jew, refers to the ferreting out of communists who were in practice Soviet agents as a Holocaust, even though in the McCarthy era only a handful of communists ever went to jail. But by his own account, Alinsky was too independent to join the party, but instead became a forerunner of the left that emerged in the wake of that communist era's fall. Like leftists who came of age after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Alinsky understood that there was something flawed in the communist outlook, but also, like them, he never really examined what those flaws might be. In particular, he never questioned the Marxist view of society and human nature, or its goal of a utopian future, and never examined connection to the epic crimes that Marxists had committed. And that's the reason I say that part, is you look at the Democrat Party now, they won't even acknowledge their own crimes. In the last 300 years, the Democrats have committed more crimes against their own people than enemies have. I mean, if you look at what they've done to segments of this society and what they continue to do, it's just mind-boggling that they're still in play.
Yeah, but I mean, this is when the Republican Party goes completely silent. It's absolutely mum's the word. They say nothing. They protest nothing. that is the best example that the Alinsky tactics works. And I mean, you look at the 60s. The 60s left had no connection to the labor movement, but Alinsky did. The most important radical labor organizer of the time, Cesar Chavez, who was the leader of the United Farm Workers Union, was trained by Alinsky and worked for him for 10 years. Alinsky also shaped the future of the civil rights movement after the death of Martin Luther King. When racial unrest erupted in Rochester, New York, Alinsky was called in by activists to pressure Eastman Kodak to hire more blacks and form a racial extortion that became a standard of the civil rights movement under the leadership of Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. Alinsky also pioneered the alliance of radicals with the Democratic Party, which ended 2 decades of confrontation, climaxing in the convention riot of 1968. Through Chavez, Alinsky had met Robert Kennedy, who supported his muscling of Kodak executives. But the Kennedys were only one of the avenues through which Alinsky organizers now made their way into the inner circles of the Democratic Party.
All right, let's go fast forward, actually laterally, into this clip about William Jefferson Blythe.
During the 1960s, students were protesting the Vietnam War on college campuses throughout the nation. It was no different at the University of Arkansas. Here on the university campus, Clinton would climb into a tree where he would place a mattress and spend days on end to declare his own protest against the war. People in Fayetteville still recall walking a block out of their way just to avoid the strong stench that came from the ground below Clinton. The fire department showed up on at least one occasion to wash the ground below the tree and even gave young Clinton unwanted free showers with their hoses. A photo of Clinton in the tree made the school newspaper, but all known copies of that particular edition have since been confiscated or destroyed. Mr. Clinton studied at Oxford in England. Most of his professors there described themselves as Marxist-Leninists or socialists. In early 1969, Clinton was called to London for a physical examination and was classified 1A, which meant Vietnam. Upon his return to Arkansas, Clinton drove to Fayetteville to the home of Colonel Eugene Holmes, commander of the Army ROTC unit at the University of Arkansas, where he begged to join the program. Clinton signed a letter of intent and gave a pledge to enter the university law school. In the fall, he returned to Oxford, where he would help organize demonstrations against the United States outside the American embassy. On December 2, 1969, in violation of his promise to enroll in the ROTC program, he applied to Yale Law School. On December 3rd, he wrote a letter to Colonel Holmes stating, quote, "Because of my opposition to the draft and the war, I have great sympathy with those who are not willing to fight, kill, and maybe die for their country," unquote. Mr. Clinton was described as a moocher and with no apparent income. Yet he left England for a 40-day trip to Scandinavia, the Soviet Union, and Czechoslovakia. Clinton stayed at one of Moscow's most exclusive hotels, the National. Clinton went on to Prague, where he stayed with Oxford friend John Kopold's parents, who were leaders in the Communist Party. The grandfather was a founder of the Czech Communist Party and a member of the party's Central Committee. In fact, Communist Czechoslovakia had been a training area for international terrorists.
Well, there you have it. Quite the filthy swine that became the President of the United States later on.
I'm going to guess a lot of people in the audience didn't know about him living in a tree and defecating off the branches. I mean, that's something that never came out in the U.S. media.
No, and it was actually published in the school newspaper, but lo and behold, every copy of that issue of the newspaper has just since disappeared. So, well, when you have enough money. But in 1969, the year that the publishers reissued Alinsky's first book, Reveille for Radicals, a Wellesley undergraduate named Hillary Rodham submitted her 92-page senior thesis on Alinsky's theories. She interviewed him personally for the project. In her conclusion, Hillary compared Alinsky to Eugene Debs, Walt Whitman, and Martin Luther King. The title of Hillary's thesis was "There is Only the Fight, an analysis of the Alinsky model." In this title, she had singled out the single most important Alinsky contribution to the radical cause, his embrace of political nihilism. And SDS Radical once wrote, "The issue is never the issue. The issue is always the revolution." In other words, the cause, whether inner city, blacks or women, is never the real cause, but only an occasion to advance the real cause, which is the accumulation of power to make the revolution. That was the all-consuming focus of Alinsky and his radicals.
And understand that in Washington, D.C., who voted 91% for Hillary Clinton, there are some Saul Alinsky scholars in these agencies. I mean, they know this. You look at the revelations of extensive spying on individuals by the NSA, but that wasn't even not the only or even the first major scandal to rock the second-term administration of Barack Obama. In May 2013, a month before the NSA revelation shocked Americans, the political bullying of conservatives by the IRS and other government agencies began to come to light. And a little less than a year earlier, in September 2012, news dribbled out about the attempted official denial and cover-up of the murder of 4 Americans in a terrorist assault in Benghazi, Libya, including Ambassador Chris Stevens, the first American ambassador killed in office in only 32 years. You have to flash back to another soft communist, Jimmy Carter. These things are going on, and if you look at George Orwell, and who even had a verb or an adjective named after him, Orwellian, you see what he said coming true. I mean, when they change all the history, and what are they trying to do right now when they erase all of the history with these statues coming down? If they want to take down a statue to slavery, they ought to tear down the IRS building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is it is horrible to watch what is going on now, because when you have read and understood Alinsky's rules for radicals, which isn't really that hard, but when you understand that and you look what's going on in not only American media but in Western media in general, they are running on Alinsky power, and when you see these Black Lives Matter and all these riots and protests, and the Democratic Party even trying to demolish their own racial and segregation heritage, it's absolutely unbelievable how badly the population has become dumbed down.
Look at him in New York. Look at him in New York, when Mayor Michael Bloomberg's micromanaging obsession with eliminating choice from everyday lives of New Yorkers. I mean, it went from salt in restaurants to supersized soda. I mean, these so-called liberals have a very illiberal compulsion to control every aspect of your existence. That's the communist way, the totalitarian way. I haven't used the word liberal in years. Liberal is not an accurate description of these totalitarian racists. It's just not. They're not liberal about anything except spending your money.
No, and actually more and more of them are calling themselves progressives. And the natural question to ask when you hear someone calling them progressives is, what are they? What do they want to progress towards? And I mean, take another example, a concept that is gathering momentum among the leftist elite in and connected to the White House, which is nudging, a seemingly innocuous form of social engineering designed to steer Americans subtly towards making the correct choices in our personal and social lives, a kinder, gentler totalitarianism, if you will. And this was written a way back. This is an excerpt from the book Obama's 1984. But it's absolutely completely correct. They were trying to nudge people into a totalitarian society, and they were on the doorstep with Obama.
And let me give
they would have succeeded with Hillary.
Let me give you an example of the nudge, and that was the not so big fine associated with Obamacare. That was a nudge, and this nudge was conceived by Cass Sunstein, who is a very dangerous man. He was Barack Obama's regulation czar, and they're still trying to undo the things that he did. His wife, incidentally, is Samantha Power, the UN ambassador who is under investigation for unmasking U.S. citizens in intelligence media. But this guy and this nudge, I think one of the most dangerous positions Norway today in the United States of America is the communist mayor. I think you can jump down from the federal and state governments. You go to these mayors like mine. Mine published a piece on Twitter just reveling in the nudge and telling people to read about the nudge. Today, he said, I kept my promise to bring Iraqis and Afghanis that were translators for the military to Pittsburgh. He's creating a bike lane on one of the most crowded streets in the city. The mayors are the ones that need to be taken down.
This is the proverbial, this is what Trump has to battle with every day. I mean, these Alinskyites have built a really solid state construct, and Trump has to bust through this every single day of his presidency, and he is battling a completely Alinskyite media. And I mean, when you look at Cass Sunstein, incidentally, he's a Harvard law professor, talking about the nudge on how government and other organizations could induce people to avoid common errors. We all have a little Homer Simpson in us, says Sunstein, referring to the slothful, selfish cartoon character on the Fox animated show The Simpsons. And once people realize that, then there's a lot that can be done to manipulate them by nudging them in the right direction.
Keep in mind Jonathan Gruber when he talked about Obamacare and when he talked about the stupid American voter. By the way, he got convicted today in New England, and he is no longer allowed to accept any government money. He took a plea. There was a plea on some of his billing in Vermont or New Hampshire. I think it was Vermont. But he did go down today. We'll see if that sticks or not. But I don't know. I want you to go away this evening. When somebody says Democrats are communist, progressive is synonymous with communist. If you look back before Woodrow Wilson, who was the real father with Teddy Roosevelt of progressivism, the communist was a little bit more accepted back then, but it started going downhill, and they had to change the name. They do that a lot in Norway. They change their moniker, but the core evil remains the same.
Absolutely. They're really good with words, and I mean, like Hertz has said a gazillion times here on Cold War Radio, and me too. Language is really, really important. Pay attention to language, because language is slowly being molded into something that numbs the mind. So you have to be really, really conscious about what does these different terms mean. You need to drill into this matter and understand the background of this. And this is at the core of the Alinsky tactics.
It is 100%.
So and you see that every day in the media. It's practiced with great skill to try and shift people's minds, and it's so dangerous because it's really the shortest route to a totalitarian society.
And one of the imperatives is to remove God from the conversation. When Trotsky, when they came up and they found Charles Darwin, man, that was a party there. They accepted him right away because he took God out of the equation. If you look what we were talking about words and language, how else could murdering an unborn baby be called women's health? Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it. It's something that we just go through. I could name a dozen different things like that, but this is all to destroy God in our society, and not to be a Bible thumper, but if you don't have a moral code, you'll go along with a lot of things.
Absolutely. And this is one of the parts we didn't have time to cover in our last show about the Democratic Party's ties to the Nazis. But indeed, I mean, Margaret Sanger, Ku Klux Klan, all these guys.
We're going to get it all, though. We'll cover it all. But what are we going to get next week?
Well, we're on a roll, Hutch. So you came up with a brilliant idea that next week we'll take a closer look at the Democratic Party's ties to the third big totalitarian ideology, namely Islam.
Yes, sir. So join us tomorrow night for the 500th episode of Cold War Radio, and next Monday for Muslim infiltration of the Democrat Party. I wish I could leave it there, but a little bit of the Republican Party too. David Horowitz taught me that. Norway, how can people get in touch with you on social media?
First of all, I'm looking forward to starting with you at 7 p.m. tomorrow for a 2-hour show, and I'll bring cake and coffee. And people can get in touch with me on @Norway4Trump on Twitter and Gab, and that is @Norway4 with the number 4. So @Norway4Trump on Twitter and Gab.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank everybody for listening live and for participating in the chat room, for our callers. I'm not sure if the Wayne Dupree show is up next or not. I'm going to go check. If it is, I'll be there.
No, he's up at 10 because we have Trump's rally coming up now at 9. So he'll start at 10.
He said that good. Okay, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if I'm going to make that or not. But anyway, thanks to everybody for listening. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. on Facebook, Berg's Eye View on Twitter. Only Fox Business and C-SPAN are covering this address. What a disrespectful move of the media.
And RSBN.
RSBN, okay. God bless everybody.
God bless.